Antifa has taken to the streets of Portland to direct traffic? Really? They're directing traffic? Hey everybody, I'm Steve Gree with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle on lefty mob violence, mob rule at the street level and a bit higher. Gents, I couldn't believe I found this clip over the weekend, and I'm laughing at it because it's absurd, but it's also a little scary. So let me just show you just a few seconds what went on over the weekend in Portland.
Oh, can I? Well, shut the f*** up, Sergeant Guard, traffic, dumb
Just go that way. Because I told you to.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Don't hurt
Yeah,
me.
brother.
Just go.
Yeah, you little white little
Really?
Yeah. You're a whitey, little whitey, aren't you?
And gents, there's another clip of an elderly man being chased down while one of the other Antifa thugs threatens to beat him up. A local journalist said on Twitter about this, he said, this is the type of street anarchy that routinely happens where I live. Mayor Ted Wheeler, who really runs this town? Well, I guess in Portland and elsewhere, the mob runs the town, or at least wants to. Bill, if we can't follow the actual traffic laws, if people can enforce their own randomly, where the hell are we going with this?
You know, I love my Camaro, and it's been the best car I ever had, but it's 2012, and it's getting a little older, and I get the feeling if I were driving through an intersection and I saw a couple of these clowns in black masks trying to tell me what to do with my car, I'm just concerned that the brakes might fail at the wrong time. You know,
with an older car. That's a real risk.
Yeah, these things can happen. You know, they can just happen. They start to squeak a little bit. Next thing you know, don't you find that one of the most reassuring parts of this whole nightmare is just how childish these people are? For instance, you hear protesters banging down the doors of the Supreme Court, you know, to protest Kavanaugh being sworn in, and then you think, okay. And then you look and you see it's like 9 kind of spaghetti-armed white kids from Bourgeois U, and they're and half the time you can tell they're kind of looking at the cameras and and posing for it, and it's just one giant temper tantrum. The thing that's most impressive about Antifa for me is how quickly Antifa gets on the unicycle and starts pedaling backwards whenever anybody real shows up. You know, whenever you have veterans there, for example, or patriotic motorcycle guys or something like that. Yeah. This is what we've known they were from the beginning, right? Anybody who wears a mask is a coward, especially in a country like this. It's not just that they don't want to be spotted by the police. That's a lot of it. But what they see themselves as is, when they put that ski mask on, they see themselves as a cross between kind of Che Guevara and Lawrence of Arabia, you know, like they really do. They identify pretty hard with ISIS and with Al Qaeda, that kind of, masked warrior with the scimitar raised high in the sky, riding his white Arab charger across the desert and slaughtering infidels and all the rest of this stuff. There's been some discussion about among conservatives that sounds more serious than it has been before. This Kavanaugh thing was a real milestone. About this is not a can of worms that you want to open, guys, on the left. Yeah. You do not want to open the street violence use of force with people who are not only heavily armed and well trained, but have essentially been waiting for 40 years for a target that we could legitimately shoot at. I looked it up. Apparently, you think about opening fire on these people, but it's against the law. This stupid country. But no, I looked into it. I did. I researched it pretty hard. And nevertheless, self-defense is not against the law. If somebody's pulling me out of a car or assaulting me, what am I going to do? Am I going to trust their good nature, that they're not going to put me down and curb stomp me to death? If they're ready to pull an old man out of a car, or push somebody, or any of this stuff, yeah. Kick a pregnant woman who's pro-life, they're willing to do that. Okay. All right. I know what self-defense is. I know I live in California. If I was living in Texas, I'd be breathing a lot easier. But nevertheless, you wonder if we are not looking at some kind of a spark, some kind of a Harper's Ferry, something to just kind of ignite the tinder of these people who've just lost their minds. But the reason ultimately that I'm still in the country, I think, is because every time I think about who's committing the acts of violence and who's committed them in the past, I realize this is the first time in history that it's the victims that are outgunning the oppressors by 300 million to 1 or something like that. It's a comforting feeling. I've used this before, and I don't mean it to sound flip. I really don't. But there were probably 40,000 SS Einsatzgruppen who did the actual rounding up of people during the war. Probably 40,000 SS men who actually all together went into buildings and pulled out people, mostly Jews. There's 40,000 Einsatzgruppen SS men, and there's 6 million Jews, and if each Jew is armed and takes one with them, you run out of SS a long time before you run out of Jews. A long time. And they wonder why we are so obsessed with keeping our weapons after what we've seen and are about to see.
Bill, just a tiniest little follow-up. That Supreme Court protest, where they're pounding on the door, that happened on Monday of this week, correct? Mm-hmm. Columbus Day? Court's not in session?
I think so.
Who did they think
was... No, it was Sunday. It was Sunday, wasn't it?
Sunday. Court's still not in session on Sunday.
No, he was in there being sworn in. And by the way, and appropriately enough, the doors to the Supreme Court building are made of sturdier stuff than these people are. And, so there you go.
I saw something today. Those are 13-ton doors. I don't know if it's true or not because I saw it on Twitter, but I'm inclined to believe it.
13-ton doors and drywall protesters.
Indeed. Scott, before we get to you, I want to show you this next clip. It happened down your way at the University of Texas for some pro-Kavanaugh, very polite. I don't even know if protesters is the right word. They were just there at their table with their sign being nice. Watch.
You should.
It's my responsibility as supervisor to make.
Are you hungry?
Student government, guys.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Sarah, right?
There she is.
Yeah.
Smile for the camera.
This is an elected representative of student government. Doesn't understand civil discourse.
Yep. There we go.
Stop trying to take my things.
Excuse me, ma'am. Are you trying to assault me?
This is
This
literally
is assault.
you
Yes,
to
Sarah!
survivors. Yes.
All right, Scott, we had the, I think Bill alluded to this a couple of minutes ago, the guy in Toronto who kicked the pro-life counter-protester to their pro-abortion demonstration. What gets into people's heads, or maybe more accurately, what gets into people's hearts that thuggery becomes their solution?
Steve, I'm really surprised that you don't agree with these tactics. I mean, after all, you are a libertarian. You claim to be anyway. And it is clear to me that these are acts of speech. When you tear up somebody else's...
Yeah.
Yes, when you tear up somebody else's posters, you are expressing yourself. When you kick a pregnant woman in the womb, you are expressing yourself. When
You're
get
watching
out
a master at work, ladies and gentlemen, a master.
Truly.
Pay close attention.
When you direct traffic, I mean, isn't that just another form of speech? In fact, I think that you should be in favor of that because you probably don't want the police out there telling you what to do in your car anyway. Why shouldn't individuals be able to go out there and sort of designate their own traffic laws? The funny thing about this is we see stuff like this and we think, wow, some spontaneous act of passionate rage on the part of a slightly unhinged person. But really, all of these things probably required weeks of planning. Somebody took minutes. There was a secretary at the meeting. They all stood and saluted the swastika or whatever they do before their meetings. I mean, this whole traffic interruption thing, that was a planned event. These are Saul Alinsky type staged events where these people go out of there and they think in their minds, this is winning. This is convincing people. Wait till people see this video of us tearing up these signs. Wait till they see us kicking that pregnant woman. Wait till they see us out there dragging old men out of their cars. This is going to let people know that our cause is a just and righteous one and people should vote with us in the future. somehow they persuaded themselves. But I look at them and say, how can you tell when you see a guy in a black mask whether he is a liberal protester or he's ISIS? I think we need to treat him like ISIS until we find out otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think ISIS is far less of a threat to this country.
Actually, that is absolutely true.
Somebody asked me once at a speaking event. They said, "What do you think is a bigger threat to America, the radical left or Islam?" I said, "Well, it's obviously the radical left. There's no question about it. It's a no-brainer, because if there is no radical left, there is no Islamic threat either." So.
And I don't mean to suggest, by the way, that the same remedy is required for both ISIS and the Antifa people. But either. If you're going to go out there and basically say, I've stepped outside of the bounds of civility and have become a threat to you, what kind of response do you expect to get? Do you think people will really look at you and go, man, I want to grow up to be like him?
Right. Scott, you just reminded me of this. My wife and I have been rewatching the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale Batman movies, and we're on the last one, Dark Knight Rises. And just before we started taping tonight, you had Bane's big speech on the steps of the courthouse or the jail or whatever it was. They've got this fusion bomb ready to go off. They've blown all the bridges in and out of the city, and Bane's up there with his mask and his microphone saying, "I have liberated you." Great, thanks. I could deal without that kind of liberation, buddy. And it's not just the street-level mob rule that we're seeing in Texas, in Portland, and even in Toronto, and so many other places. We're also seeing attempts at high-level mob rule. We just spent the last 2 years getting lecture after lecture from the Clinton camp and the rest of the progressive left about how the Electoral College robbed Hillary Clinton of her rightful throne behind the Resolute desk. Although I can't help but notice that the left and the Democrats weren't complaining about the Electoral College in the 1990s when it gave Bill Clinton 2 Electoral College wins with big enough mandates that he could govern effectively, even though he failed to win the popular vote in either 92 or 96. And
he didn't win the majority, but he won the plurality, though, right?
He did, but not a majority.
Because
and
of Ross Perot
Yeah, and neither did Hillary, for that matter, because not enough Americans simply trusted Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump to give them a majority, although we'll see what happens in 2020. I suspect it'll be something different. I hope, anyway. Another thing we saw over the weekend were attempts to smear the Senate, not the Republicans and one Democrat who voted to approve Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, but the Senate as an institution for essentially not being the House of Representatives. There was this stupid infographic of a bunch of Western states, like the one I live in, with fewer people in them than Los Angeles County, where Bill lives. I'm sorry you still live there, Bill. As if this somehow meant something. The Senate is what it is in order to prevent the large states from trampling over the small states. In other words, to prevent mob rule. The Electoral College exists for the exact same reason, to prevent huge majorities in a few states from trampling the rights of everybody else. It's the Constitution exists to protect us from mob rule, and everything you see from the progressive left, whether it's the people on the streets of Portland or the people in the halls of Washington D.C. on the left side of the aisle of that Senate building last week, that Senate wing last week, it's all the same. It's all mob rule, and we have to fight it, and we have to protect the Constitution with every fiber of our being. And I hope you're up with the fight, because I have the feeling it's about to get really, truly nasty. That's your right angle on that. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you see and want to become a member, click on over to BillWhittle.com. We would love it if you were on board with this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.